What's going on, YouTube? We are back here on the Fumble Pod, ready to talk some college football action. Very interesting weekend. Very interesting weekend. There was some things I didn't expect to happen. Big shockers. Let's get right into it. I am your host, Dalton Lee. Let's dive right into it. So first off, we're going to start off with a game I didn't even really touch on at all last week. A game that I didn't think was relevant enough to talk about, but it has become relevant to talk about. Florida State going to Virginia. Number 8, Florida State versus unranked Virginia, who has played very good this year. Virginia has played very good this year. Good enough to upset number 8, Florida State. Double overtime. Which is crazy to think because Virginia led most of the game. And Florida State, tried to claw their way back into it and fall short in double overtime. I didn't talk about the game because I didn't think it was that important. In my mind, I was like, yeah, Virginia's had a good year. They've handled, most business. It was weird that their one loss was to NC State. Now looking at what NC State's done the last 2 weeks, Virginia offensively is very good. But still, they weren't going to compete with Florida State. Florida State has been firing on all cylinders all year. Week 1 went and beat Alabama. Is consistently rolled through opponents since then. So I was expecting this to be another one of them, not like a roll situation, but like if Florida State had won, 45-13, I'd be like, yeah, it makes sense. Florida State, number 8 in the country, they deserve to be in that spot. No. I don't want to say lay an egg because they put up 38 points. It's just, Virginia is better than what we thought. Clearly, is what it's telling us. But, if you're Florida State, you cannot lose this game. Especially knowing who you're going to play this week. You have Miami this week. Florida State's at a very tough predicament. They already have one loss. If they lose to Miami this week, there's still probably a world where they can make the playoff only because Alabama has improved their stock. We'll get on that later. But they have no margin for error if they lose this weekend after laying an egg to Virginia. Virginia is now ranked, which, deservingly, you beat number 8 Florida State. You have looked like one of the sleeper teams in the ACC, and you made your statement. You made your coming out statement to the rest of the country. So it's, hats off to Virginia for absolutely just going in there and handling business. That was probably one of my bigger shocks. Next, into some of the ranked matchups we were talking about before I hit on the matchups that were closer to my heart. Auburn, Texas A&M. This was a very ugly, low-scoring game. 16-10. A&M, number 9 in the country, wins this game. The Auburn defense is for real. That Auburn defense is very, very good. The only thing kind of holding them back is the consistency on offense. And I feel like the offense is like right there, ready to make a play or two, and they're just not there yet. Whereas a team like A&M, they have a couple more playmakers, a little more continuity going in on offense. I am surprised at the jump this A&M team has made from last year. Not entirely shocked, just because Marcel Reed does add a little more complexity to your offense versus what Connor Wegman did last year. Marcel Reed has shown to be able to throw the ball effectively, but be a threat running the ball as well. And they just have a plethora of weapons. Auburn put up a really good fight. It was a really good game, especially if you like just hard-nosed, gritty football. It was a great game, but if you're an Auburn fan, I wouldn't hang your head too low over the last 2 weeks because you have played 2 really good teams between Oklahoma and now A&M. It is what it is. I do think Auburn is starting to get on track to trend in the right direction. It's just, I think they're another year or two away. And then Ohio State, Washington. This game for a while, like a lot of people and I thought, was closer than expected. I mean, the final score was 24-6, but going into that fourth, there was really only like 17-6, like 13-6. Like, it was a weirdly close game. Especially when you look at the Ohio State side, you're like, they have that much talent on defense. They still have more star power on offense, and the game is this close. Eventually, they were able to kind of just grind it out and get a big win, which, yeah, they won. Yes, they're the number one team in the country, but they really didn't look like the number one team in the country for a lot of that game. So now it's going to raise a lot of questions for not only them, but a lot of other teams in the top 10. Because now we're starting to float around the idea of, is there truly a great team in college football? I think there's a lot of good teams, really good teams, but I don't know if we necessarily have like a definitive great team. And I think that's the one good thing about the NIL is broke up the idea of great teams and made more just good teams. There's more competition, which is going to be better in the long term. Now, I understand there's still flaws with the NIL, especially when you get to some of the bigger schools fighting with the little schools, but one can hope, one can dream. And I think with the NIL and the way the transfer portal is working, it's giving you that hope in the dreams. That's why Washington is still putting up good teams after DeBoer has left. I mean, I even even though they lost, I don't see how they couldn't consider Washington to be still closer to a top 25 team with how well they played against them. Granted, I understand you're playing number one team in the country, arguably the best defense, probably the best player on offensive side of the ball in Jeremiah Smith, and you're right there with him for majority of that day. Next, I'll touch on this one briefly. Tennessee sneaks out a win in overtime against Mississippi State, a game that they went back and forth on for a while. Surprisingly, I think this was kind of like a trap game for Tennessee. I think they were overlooking Mississippi State, and then when Mississippi State kind of like punched them right in the face, they're like, "Oh!" It took them a little time to get back into it, but once they did, they started looking like Tennessee of old. It was just it was interesting to sit there and look and be like, they're really in that game, and they were really leading that game. I thought they were really going to win late into it, but Tennessee pulls it out in the end. Just want to throw that in there. Didn't really talk about it last week. All right, one of the first games we were definitely wrong on. Ole Miss LSU. Ole Miss upsets LSU 24-19. And the only reason this is shocking to me is just because of how much more dominant Ole Miss looked in this game compared to LSU. I thought going into this game, LSU was going to be able to run the ball pretty well because even though they hadn't really done it all year, they've had to play some really good defenses. Based off of what we've seen from this Ole Miss defense, they couldn't really stop the run. So I was thinking this was the game that was going to potentially get the ball rolling on running game for LSU. And it just didn't happen. LSU could not get that push to save their lives. And what did it lead to? It led to an Ole Miss team being able to get a couple stops early, go down, get some scores, and then just keep away from this LSU offense. Now we're starting to question is it ever going to work with Brian Kelly? You know, he had made the statement that it wouldn't work at Notre Dame because they couldn't get the recruits. Okay. You go to LSU, who has been very good at getting recruits just because of brand name and location. You, Brian Kelly, have brought in some really good recruiting classes. And yet you keep kind of falling short. You had a Heisman winner and you didn't make the playoff. You get yourself into these top 5 team spots and then you just kind of throw it away. You did it last year against Alabama when Alabama was a solid team, but they weren't that good. You just throw it away. You let Jalen Milroe run all over you. You get into this game. You can't assert your will on offense. You let this Ole Miss team kind of push you around on both sides of the ball. And Ole Miss was starting a new quarterback. They were starting Chilbers. Hadn't really played a whole lot this year. And he looked really good. Both running and passing. He looked really good. I will admit, Lane Kiffin was kind of in his bag coaching this game. It was that was really the difference in this. LSU got outcoached straight up by Lane Kiffin. I understand Lane Kiffin was kind of playing for a little more, His daughter's dating the starting middle linebacker Whit Weeks. But Lane Kiffin's undefeated against the daughter's boyfriends. Shout out Lane. But yeah, Lane, that Ole Miss team looks really good. If they're able to play like that week in and week out, I couldn't see why they wouldn't be competing for a top SEC spot and a playoff spot. But I'm actually going to be a little consistent because it's weird to see this team beat this LSU team but barely sneak out a win against Kentucky. That's the only part that gets confusing. But that's what's so interesting about college football because you get games like that against Kentucky that are really, really close for no reason. And then they're able to turn around and beat number 4 LSU. This is why we love it. This is why we love it. Now, next game that I did get right. Number 6 Oregon going to Penn State. They win in overtime. It was close. Well, I say close. Oregon jumped out to a big lead early. They were up 14 points early. Drew Aller and that offense comes roaring back, ties it up. We go to overtime. Both teams score in overtime, 24 all. Oregon scores again, doesn't get 2-point. First possession on the second overtime on offense, and Drew Aller just throws a pick a ball that really probably shouldn't have been thrown. It was a little wheel route to the tight end. I understand why they called it up because it should work, but the Oregon defense must have watched so much film that they had 2 guys over there ready for it. Because the first defender didn't get the ball, he had a teammate right behind him in the same spot ready. They had 2 guys in the same spot ready to catch that ball. And that's how the game ends. And it's just it's the same thing every year from Penn State. You beat everybody you're supposed to in a regular season. Then you get to these big games and all of a sudden you kind of fold. And at this point, I don't think it's necessarily a talent difference. Yeah, I would say Oregon's receivers are better than Penn State's. But off of this game, I would still argue Penn State's defense is probably better than Oregon's. But yet, they're not able to keep you in this game. And Drew Aller, a quarterback that a lot of people think could be talent-wise or, physically the best quarterback in this upcoming NFL draft, lays another egg in a big-time game. Like, at least with a lot of these other quarterbacks, you can look at it and go, well, he had a big game against this team. He had a big game against this team that are other big teams. Drew Aller, through 2 years, hasn't really. Didn't against Ohio State. Boise State, he wasn't really the hero of that game. It was the fact that they ran the ball so dominant against them, and the defense just stopped Ashton Genty. But we saw what happened when they played Notre Dame, when all Notre Dame physically could do was run the ball. And nothing from them. Oregon's a big win. You're starting to prove that, yes, you are a true potential contender and a true potential powerhouse program now. To go into Penn State in a whiteout game and be able to play as well as you did for a majority of the game and get the win is huge. It's huge. Dante Moore had a really good day. Offense as a whole had a really good day. They got a little stagnant in the second half after jumping out to that big lead, but they were able to make plays when they needed to. And that's what it ultimately came down to. Who made the plays when they needed to. And it seemed like when it was a big play opportunity, it was Oregon winning them. Now we got to start questioning, is James Franklin really that guy as a coach? Is he really that guy as a coach? I like him. I think he builds good programs, but it's just, I don't know if he's that guy that's actually going to win you a national championship at this point. They just haven't shown being able to get over that hump or get around that curve. It's always just been like same stopping point, and then you just kind of plateau. I say all this, and who knows? They might turn around and beat Ohio State. Who knows? But it's just, I don't know. It's it's weird. Penn State always has all this talent, and they just never really amend much to it. Whereas Oregon, I'm not gonna say Oregon has like no talent. I would just argue that more consistently they have even or maybe slightly subpar talent outside of a couple key positions like wide receiver and quarterback and maybe a defender or two. But yet, I feel like they've always been closer to reaching that mountaintop in terms of public eye versus Penn State. Now we're going to swing back over to some of the early clock games before I get into the big matchup of the night. Georgia Tech scrapes out a win against Wake Forest, which honestly, if I'm Wake Forest, you probably feel a little hosed in it. Some of the officiating in that game was really bad, especially when it comes to a offsides that wasn't called. When you have a literal D lineman on a knee past the line of scrimmage before the ball is snapped, and then when the ball is snapped, didn't move, and it just doesn't get called, which leads to an incompletion on a third down, which really should have been a first, thus then leading Wake Forest to punt the ball to Georgia Tech, in which they immediately go down and score. Granted, Georgia Tech is the better team on paper, but this game got stolen from Wake Forest. Wake Forest played a really good game, especially against this Georgia Tech team. And you can tell Georgia Tech got a little nervous late into the game. And yet Wake Forest, even with all this being said, with no time left, had a chance to tie it. They chose to go for two. And they just kind of fall short, which I give credit to them. You've already felt like this game had been almost handed to Georgia Tech. You're in a position to go to a double overtime or just outright take the win at home. I don't hate the decision. If I was the coach in that spot, I'd probably do the same thing. Because if you get the win, then you argue that you were robbed, but you still, ball doesn't lie. But it just leaves a really bad taste in your mouth for you to get cheated out on a play or two that gave momentum to the other team that allowed them to get back in it, just to then lose in overtime. But again, Georgia Tech still getting the win, still proving that they are another dark horse in the ACC to make a run for a potential ACC championship berth, especially after a Florida State loss. They are still one of the few 2-0 teams in the ACC. So, that is still big for them. And who knows what they do with it. They still got a couple somewhat tough games coming up over the next couple weeks. We'll just have to see how they all play out. And then a game I got wrong. Number 21 ranked USC going to number 23 ranked Illinois. Illinois gets out of there with a 2-point win. This game was back and forth for a while. And then Illinois pulled away. They were up 2 scores. USC had to claw their way to get back into it to tie it. And then Illinois scores, gets a stop, and they're driving down the field again with the potential to go up 2 scores with 6 minutes left in the game. Kind of put the nail in the coffin, write it off. And USC's defense makes a play, forces a fumble right there in the red zone. They recover, immediately get the ball, and it's just, that quarterback by USC is good. Maava just immediately just zip, just getting them down the field. Down the field. And that receiver they got, Lemon, that guy's a baller. Had 2 touchdowns a day, north of 100 yards. They got a good connection. I still like what USC has going on over there. And it's kind of heartbreaking to watch them lose this game after you're able to go down the field, take a 1-point lead late, and then Illinois is just kind of able to march down the field, get in field goal range, and kick a 40-plus yarder to win it. Kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth. But honestly, if if you're the coach staff of either team, unless you coach the defense, you're not super upset by this game. Both teams played phenomenal. This was a really entertaining game. You had a bit of everything. You had defensive plays. You had a couple special teams plays that really made a difference, and then you had two offenses that were just clicking. It was a great game to watch, especially in the early clock window. And then before we get to the big game, talk about my boys for just a minute. In another ACC game, we'll start we'll start with this game because this game was before the other one. So Duke played Syracuse. Duke just rolled over Syracuse 38-3, and I would be lying to you if I didn't say that after that first quarter I was a little worried because even with the backup Ricky Collins playing for Syracuse, that offense was still moving. They ran the ball really well to start that game. Ricky Collins made a handful of good throws, like on time, accurate, in rhythm that got him down the field. It was just once their issue was they could get down the field, but then when it came to like crunch time areas, it would either be a bad drop or a penalty that would go against them. They kind of started shooting themselves in the foot, and once that happened, Duke then just took that and immediately turned those into scoring opportunities. And that's kind of where the tide turned. Like Ricky Collins had a turnover, Duke immediately scored 4 plays later. Then they turn around and get a stop. Duke scores again. And then you just felt the momentum where it was kind of like maybe here leaning towards Duke, but could easily just swing back. It went from here all the way in a matter of what felt like a quarter. It just went whoom. It was a it was a it turned into a really ugly game for Syracuse quick, especially that defense. I understand the offense plays a lot into the turnover battle when you're giving up the ball 3 times. One that was questionable with a potential targeting call that forced a fumble recovered by Duke that they then turned around and said wasn't targeting. So then the play stood as called, which was a fumble possession Duke. Initially, I want to say arguing with a friend because, if we were arguing, I would have called him and yelled at him. We had a discourse, if you will. And at first, I kind of just thought he was throwing the whole ref ball at me. But the more you think on it, at the point of the game it happened, it was only a 10-point game. And immediately after that, Duke went and scored and made it 24-3. And then from there is kind of when the tide rolled. And when you look back at it, it probably should have been targeting. The way the rules worded is weird. Because if it was a helmet to helmet, all day that's just a easy call. I guess where it gets weird is when it's not helmet to helmet, and then you're having to ask yourself, is it unnecessary contact to the head? Is he a defenseless player? And that's kind of the issue because the refs immediately call targeting, which is what you're supposed to do in any type of situation like that, and then they review it. When I first saw it, I thought they were getting Duke on a targeting call and probably should have. And would it have made a difference? I don't want to say yes and I don't want to say no just because of the full outcome, but on that drive, would it have made a difference? Possibly. I mean, not possibly. It's a 15-yard penalty. Duke loses starting safety, and then Syracuse is in scoring range. But the argument I will always make is whether it's the right or wrong call. And this could have gone either way, whether it was a call on Duke or a call on Syracuse. The opposing team does still have to capitalize on it. So if a call goes the team's way and they still capitalize on it, I still don't want to necessarily say ref ball, even though I understand why some people throw out the term. And at times it is true. I would throw ref ball out in that Wake Forest Georgia Tech game for sure. So I'd be a hypocrite to sit here and say that you couldn't make a very valid argument that there was ref ball on that call there. My only counter argument for that game specifically is Duke had almost 5 more penalties for another additional 50 yards compared to Syracuse on the day. Duke had, I think, 9 penalties for 109 yards on the day to Syracuse's 5 for 40 something. So, yes, could you make the argument for ref ball in that one call? Yes. But if the team that rolls you has more penalties, you can't entirely say that one call ruined your whole game. Because even after that, Syracuse still had 2 more turnovers. That defense still got shredded up. So it's just one of those, like, a lot of people will throw an asterisk on it because of it, especially if you're a Syracuse fan, which I can't blame you. But when you let an offense still run for almost 200 yards on you and throw for almost 300 on top of it, is the one penalty going to make that much of a difference in terms of that? Maybe in that moment, in the corresponding moments after, does it make a difference? Yes. But for the entirety of the game, no. The only way I would agree with the argument is if it was 2-minute situation in a tight ball game in the fourth quarter. Yes, that makes a difference. That would make a difference because that is robbing a team of a potential chance to tie or take a lead. But this was in like middle second quarter. You still had a whole second half to play. That's just my 2 cents on it. Still, if I was Syracuse, I wouldn't really give up on Ricky Collins. He did show flashes that he could work and be a competent quarterback for your team. I just think he needs the reps. I mean, Angeli was really good. I do agree with the idea of if Angeli plays in this game, is it a lot closer? Yes, absolutely. I still think Ricky Collins could be a guy for Syracuse. I just think he needs reps under himself. That's just my 2 cents. The offense, I think, is fine. Their defense has to work out some things for sure. But to get to the other side of it, Duke is playing off of that big win against State, where they looked like the more dominant team and showed a lot of people the Duke team that we were expecting going into the year. That's how they played again in the Syracuse game. Defense flying around the ball, making tackles for loss, forcing turnovers, and the offense immediately turning around and scoring on them. That's winning football. Duke is trending in the right direction. I remember several times last year where the defense was playing lights out and the offense wasn't doing their part. And now we're getting to see some complementary football from defense to offense. And then when the offense is scoring, defense is coming back out and putting in work to get another stop because they know, well, if we keep getting stops, our offense is going to score. Just that's what makes a team a well-oiled machine, is when you can play complementary football. Darian Mensah is looking like the best quarterback in the ACC. Statistically, I would make that argument. I understand, Castellanos has played good. Beck has played good. Angeli, before he got hurt, was playing really good. So there are several quarterbacks you can make the argument for as playing good, but Darian Mensah is right in that conversation with all those guys. Just has been really good the last couple weeks of not turning the ball over, getting the ball out quick and accurate to his playmakers. And what really helped today was the fact that they ran the ball really well. Between true freshman Nate Shepard, who had a day. I think he tied the record for most rushing yards by a freshman in a game. I think he had 144. Anderson Castle has played out of his mind, just being the bruising back, while Shepard was a more change of pace, has some speed on him, will still run through a person. He will still run through a man in a heartbeat. It's kind of sad to watch Jaquez Moore kind of get bumped out of the rotation a little bit because I had high hopes for him just because he was a shifty, speedy back. But when you can tell a guy's having trouble finding the holes and is starting to like stutter step a lot at the line of scrimmage, as to where Shepard in this game and Castle are both not only pushing through and somewhat making the hole and making plays, but then turn around and capitalizing and continuing to get those additional yards. Because there were several times where I saw a run by Nate Shepard and Anderson Castle. I'm like, this was Jaquez. This is probably 2nd and 9, 2nd and 8, and it was 2nd and 6, 2nd and 4. Those couple yards add up is throughout an entirety of not only a game but just a drive. Those additional yards open up play calling. If you know you can get 5 yards on a run and it's 2nd and 5, you're going to consider taking a shot on 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4. If you know we're averaging 4 yards a pop, 2nd and 4, you can take the risk of taking a shot deep. Because 3rd and 4, you still could throw it short. Or you can run the ball because you've shown that we can pick up 4 yards on the run. So you got complementary football between your run and pass game. The receivers are starting to gel, I think, with Mensa. They're starting to get on the same page. Cooper Baccarat had a good day. Andrew Anthony still out there making plays. Just guys all over the place, making big catches, making a couple guys miss. I will argue the Duke wide receiver core is probably one of the more athletic wide receiver cores, and they're starting to show it. They're starting to show that they can just strictly outrun guys. Even Nate Shepard out of the backfield can show that he can outrun a lot of linebackers. He did on several runs. I liked what I saw in Nate Shepard. I do hope that he gets the ball more, just because I think he can be dynamic in both the passing game and the running game. With a mix between him and Anderson Castle, they kind of have a good thing going on. So I'm excited to see how that's going to develop as the season goes on. Now, the big game we were waiting on all week. Number 17, Alabama, traveling to Athens to play number 5, Georgia. Georgia having the longest home winning streak at 33 games straight, one at home. And they lost. DeBoer is 2-0 to start his coaching career at Alabama against Georgia. In a tight contest, 24-21. After Alabama jumped to an early 17-7 lead, Georgia came roaring back to tie it up. Bama was up. No, they never tied it up. Bama was up 24-14. Georgia scores go up 24-21. I think middle of the third. And after that, no offense couldn't really do a whole lot. And I think the issue when it comes to Georgia's offense, I know what Bama was doing. Bama was just trying to kill clock, get out of that game. If they could get points, they would get points. But if they could put together a 4-minute drive that burnt time and put Georgia in tough field position, they were okay with that as well. And they executed it really well in terms of doing that. On Georgia's side, I felt like, especially when it comes to the passing game, they left a lot on the table. There were a couple times where I kind of wish Gunnar Stockton would just rip a ball in the middle of the field or down a seam, but instead you can kind of tell he questioned if he should rip that ball and would just take off. He would get positive yards for the most part, but if it's second and 4, take the shot, rip the seam, especially if it's there. And we know Gunnar Stockton has a really good arm and is fairly accurate with the ball. So it's almost like, is it a confidence issue with Gunnar? Is it the coaching staff telling him maybe don't lose the game, but it's kind of stopping him from being able to rip a play or two to win the game? I felt like Gunnar Stockton in that passing game left something out on the field that they could have probably wished had back and did over. In terms of Alabama has, since that rough week 1 loss to Florida State, has bounced back and shown that they are a top 15, top 12, maybe even top 10 team in the country. They have been putting BTA to multiple opponents they should have, and you go into Georgia and you beat Georgia. You break their home streak in front of their crowd. It's just, what more can you ask for? Granted, we saw this out of Alabama last year. We saw how it turned up for them. They still missed the playoff. But this year, I can actually confidently say that I can see the DeBoer offense actually working the way he wants to. Whereas last year, it wasn't a really great passing game outside of Ryan Williams, just because I didn't think Joe Milroy was super accurate with the ball. Whereas Ty Simpson has actually been really accurate with the ball as of late, and is still very mobile. Along with all the playmakers they have around him, that is a really good team. After today or Saturday, I would say they should be a playoff team. I'm not saying they're going to go out and win the SEC. They're in that conversation now, but they deserve to be in that conversation of being in the upper tier to SEC again and being a playoff team again. But it's still early. I would still wait to see how the rest of their season plays out. And I'm interested to see how Georgia's going to bounce back from this. You know, they did have a tight game against Tennessee, and then you lose a tight game to Georgia or to Alabama. How are you going to respond the rest of the year? Are you going to come out and still dominate like we expect you to and put yourself right back in that spot to be competing for a SEC championship, be in a playoff, win a game or two, or possibly go all the way? I think the coach staff's going to look at a lot of the film here and figure out, okay, Gunner, in this situation, you need to let it rip. Try and build confidence in him. If they can build confidence in him, I do think they do have a really good quarterback, along with a really good offense that's got a phenomenal defense on the other side of the ball. Yeah, they got burnt a little early in the game, but after that first quarter kind of meltdown, they started playing the Georgia defense we all know and expected. I still think Georgia's a really good team. I would still argue they still might be the best team in the SEC. It's just a matter of how they're going to respond as well to this tough loss at home. And knowing how Kirby Smart is, he's probably lighting a fire under them guys, and they're just going to get right after it and be ready to attack on their next opponent. But we'll just have to wait and see. That is all I got today. It was a great weekend of college football. So many exciting stories. So many great upsets. It's just, it was a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Can't wait to talk NFL. Still got some Monday night games that are happening tonight. Can't wait to talk about those tomorrow. If you're new here, subscribe, hit the notifications button, know when we post. If you enjoyed the video, like, leave a comment. Let's start a discourse down there. I'm all about having conversations, picking brains with other people. But until then, deuces.